Welcome, welcome. Hope you're having an amazing evening. Join us in Miami TV, wherever it is you're watching us. Hope you're having a great one. There we are. Hello, everyone. ¿Cómo estamos? Bienvenidos. Welcome, welcome. How are you? That is what I was saying in Spanish. ¿Cómo estamos is how are you? And then bienvenidos, welcome. Welcome, Brandon. They kind of just threw you in here. Well, it is
Hey, how you
Thursday,
doing?
guys, and it is that a night of learning with Brandon Wells. Science and spirituality is my favorite topic, and so is yours, I think. What's up, Brandon? How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, Jenny. How are you doing?
Doing good. It's been a busy, busy day. How about you? How was your week?
How you
Oh, it
doing, Jenny?
feels like we're losing your connection a bit.
Yeah, that was yeah. I think I had like a phone call. I had to basically stop and everything.
You know why, though? Because we're going to talk about aliens.
That would be it.
Okay, what do we have for
Yeah.
today? We tell everybody our topic for tonight. But as you know, Brandon and I are fanatics of UFOs and everything that has to do with the mysterious world. So if you're new to Jenny Live, this is why you're signing up for Thursday evenings at least with Brandon Wells and me, Jenny. So join us if you want to have any topics or questions. Please go ahead and share it with us. Brandon, take it away.
Okay, so I was just going to tell you that my most recent episode of my podcast, I dealt with meditation, which, let's face it, meditation within itself is incredibly important for calming the mind and basically dealing with all sorts of issues that we all have. We all have kind of, like, I guess you could say, our inner dialogue, our inner programming, if you would. And meditation is wonderful for getting rid of all of that. And dealing with that, there was a story that I heard about a couple of years ago. Now, this story actually happened in the 1960s, and it was a guy named Dr. Stephen Greer. He is from the state of North Carolina. He's a trauma surgeon doctor from Charlotte, North Carolina. He was talking about whenever he was a teenager, he was in Asheville, North Carolina. He was sitting out there on one of the mountain tops, just sitting out there meditating. And at 17 years old, he actually had a contact with extraterrestrials, and he
Wow.
began deeply. He has been considered to be one of the most foremost experts in the entire world on UFOlogy. Now, what's interesting about this is there's actually criteria for simply just meditating, but then also simply dealing with that with connecting with, alien life form. So we can kind of go over like the criteria for that, if you would. And so the criteria deals with a lot of things with, you have to be in a certain mindset. He actually talked about this where he says, you don't want to get into a mindset of, hey, I want to kick alien rear end. Like you're wanting to start a war with them or something like that. You're not supposed to be like in a violent mindset at all. Otherwise, you're going to deal with some entities that you just assume not deal with. But what's interesting about this is the fact that he says, okay, when you get into that mindset of why do you want to talk to aliens? What is your purpose behind it? If it's something to better yourself, or for that matter, if it's for the betterment of humanity, then you are most likely to be able to actually make contact with extraterrestrial beings, or I should say maybe even interdimensional beings. We're talking about different dimensions and everything. So what's interesting to say, at least about this, is the criteria goes in everything from a certain mindset to like what kind of diet are you having. One of the things that they talk about is, well, we talked about this
Wait, did he
before, how
know
a
that
lot of
he was doing this? Like, sorry to cut you. Like, was he doing this on purpose? Is your
yes,
cat
he
around?
wasn't, yeah, my cats are around somewhere, so,
We love cats. Come
wait,
on, let them in. I've
yeah.
had my cats jump on me all the time when we're doing Jenny Live.
Oh, yeah, it was, I think it might have been my mom's dog or something, who knows. Yeah, but no, he's
Okay.
over here somewhere, so I don't know what's going on. But
So back to Green. So was he purposely
yeah,
meditating to communicate with aliens, or was it just kind of a coincidence where he was trying meditation and boom, all of
I
a sudden he communicated with something else?
I would say that he was not trying to. It was just something that kind of just occurred. I wouldn't say it's a coincidence
Okay.
either, because I don't like to use the term coincidence because everything feels deeply contrived if that's the case. So it's what
Interesting.
he was actually just trying to do was meditating. But the next thing that he ends up being one of the most foremost experts in the entire world in UFOlogy. And currently speaking, he's been
Wow.
in D.C. recently dealing with the congressional hearings and Senate hearings about different types of technologies that are trying to come forth to the general populace.
Okay, so
So,
do we know, is there like a specific technique if somebody wants to communicate with aliens that they can try?
well, it's like I said, you have to get to a certain mindset and you have to be consistent about it. So it's not going to happen like the first time or whatever. And meditation is one of those things in general that takes a lot of practice to be able to do that and to be able to, to be really, really consistent about it. And, basically say, okay, I'm going to meditate for such and such time at every day around, say, 8 o'clock. And be able to do, meditation that time, that specific time, to be able to do it every day for a very long period of time to even get to that point. So obviously for him, whenever he was talking about whenever he was meditating, I don't think this happened with the first time that he ever meditated. I think this had a lot to do with him being, very spiritual to begin with, and really just, being a consistent and precise meditator long before he ever did this. I'm pretty sure he was meditating at least maybe a good 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 years prior to any of this situation ever occurring. So one of the things that we can actually talk about is when we were talking about diet, they want it to be like more of a lighter diet and everything else. So in other words, no, starchy foods, no, greasy stuff, nothing like that, no fast food, obviously. One of the other things that he actually discussed was the fact that, lighter diet usually means like fresh fruits and veggies, not a whole lot of meats and definitely not like a lot of fried and everything else. So it goes into, well, if you have a proper diet, you're actually going to be a lot more lighter, shall we say, a lot more apt in being able to have these conversations.
Lighter, that makes sense. We have some comments. Welcome, Brock, Philip. Welcome, guys. I do see your comments. Thank you for chatting. So glad you're here to share your wisdom with us again. Both of us, right? I mean, we always learn something new with
Right,
Brandon. Love the new opening.
sure.
Great. I'm glad you like it. Brandon, have you tried, have you ever had an experience like this where you communicate with someone on the other side?
Not through meditation, not yet. And
Okay.
mind you, I mean, it takes. I mean, obviously, like in general, it takes a lot of people years of practice to be able to do that and being able to be, consistent as far as with your meditation, your practice, and your time and everything else. And I guess with me personally, or a lot of people in general, we live like such fast-paced lifestyles. It's very difficult to actually be consistent with the time that we do certain things. We may not eat breakfast every day at the same time. We may not eat lunch or go to bed every day at the same time either. I remember whenever I was in college, I had one of the most erratic schedules you had ever seen. I mean, there were times where I didn't go to bed until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and getting up at 7 to do it all over again. I mean, that kind of stuff. So it was really difficult for me to actually get to that point of being able to say, okay, I'm going to meditate for X number of time each day. I'm trying to get better at it, but it is, it's not something that's necessarily happened for me so far.
It's definitely a long journey to go through. I feel like a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm going to try to meditate and see how that goes. And then they get bored
Right.
because halfway through the line,
Yeah.
you get tired that nothing is
Right.
happening, that you can't blank out your
Sure.
mind. And that's just because, like Brandon was saying, if you don't work on your overall body, if you don't work on the things that you're consuming to begin with,
Right.
I
Right.
can't say you have to be a vegetarian. But yes, a lot of people will normally
Right.
tell you to eat light so that if your body's light, you're going to
Sure.
have a better connection. I eat a lot of
Yes.
meat, so and I communicate anytime I want. So I can't necessarily say
Right.
that meat is a problem, and I've always said that,
No.
but either or. I think it's just it depends on your body. Like I was raised in a farm. My dad's business was selling meat. Basically, it was a agricultural farm. So once you get your body
Right.
used to something since you're a kid, it's really difficult to leave something. And it definitely did not stop me from having that spiritual growth. So I think that there's this whole ideology today and like go green, eat green, this and that. And you guys
Right.
just pick whatever, in my opinion, of course, humble opinion, pick whatever you feel works for your body. You don't want to become anemic. You don't want to become weak. But it's definitely a journey. I mean, you're going to start with really just focusing on yourself. If you can't focus on yourself, if you can't focus on your breath and on your present being at the moment that you're trying to go calm, then how could you possibly connect with an energy on the other side? It's not possible. So I
Well,
feel like most people today in the everyday world are not even connected to themselves anymore. You know, there's, oh, I'm moving here.
Exactly it.
You know,
Yeah,
they're connected to something else. And I guess we can always say kind of like the phones. It's almost like we become these cyborgs where we don't even think, well,
right,
I'm not going to say we, but people don't even think for themselves. They have a
right,
computer thinking for them, a phone thinking for them, their smartwatch thinking for them. And the more you get lost in that world, which not saying that there's anything wrong with technology, of course, it's great if you use it for a good purpose. But spiritually wise, I feel like it's definitely a long road from reaching spirituality. I don't think technology is helping us at all in that case. I think in science, yes, because of the breakthroughs that they're going to go through and the things that they're going to,
right.
you know, investigate and realize, oh, the soul does exist. You know, these thermal images and cameras
Yeah,
and all that stuff. But other than that, like a spiritual, imagine a technological device that can enhance our spirituality. That is never going to come out, even if it was available out there. Or if you could put a chip on your brain and say, you put that chip on and you can communicate to another planet. Nope, because you will probably no longer be part of the herd and no longer be a sheep. So that is just, it's nonsense. It all comes from within, you know. You said that
right,
Green was a very spiritual person to begin with. So I'm sure
right.
he must have been and he's probably a great person, like a good person, because
Yeah,
spirituality, in my opinion, starts from within in how you treat others and how you treat yourself, right? So that
right,
is how you heighten your energy. And the more heightened your energy is, the more you're going to be able to connect. It's basically like your channel is pure, if I might say. Do you want me to share my first alien communication?
yeah, go for it.
Let me see if I remember, because I think I think the first one well, not the first contact that I had, but I think the first communication that I had purposely without knowing that it was happening, it was in our house in Miami. And I used to just sit in a deck for a while and meditate. And all of a sudden, it's like a radio. You know, you start hearing like this distant, disturbed voices that kind of change and, you know, like you're tuning in until you get the
Right,
right frequency and they can come through. So, of course, when we say describe alien, I mean, it's basically anything that's out of our planet.
right.
And the one communication, because I tend to forget a lot and I don't write things down, which is horrible, but I will never forget this woman. It was a woman from another planet, okay? And she
Hmm.
said the planet and everything, and I think I did write it down somewhere. I'm going to have to look at my really old books. I used to write a lot.
Uh-oh.
And she basically said, how difficult is it for you to work with energy in the planet that you're living in? Because where we live, the bodies don't exist. Like the physical bodies don't exist. So
Right,
she was showing me how they were basically just all energy. Like there were lots of people living in this beautiful planet, but they didn't really need
right,
the planet to be inhabitable, right, for our human DNA because, well, they're just
right,
energy. And I think that's why maybe when the little bits of planets that we have investigated in, or, you know, the NASA has been able to reach from really far, far away in telescopes, they might say, oh, there's nobody living there. But it doesn't mean that there aren't beings in other dimensions
right,
that are, in fact, living in these planets. And, you know, and they don't have a mass or density. So she was
right,
explaining to me, and I can't quote, I don't remember exactly, but she was explaining to me how it was so beautiful because the energy there, when somebody would run out, you know, they would just kind of tap into each other. And the whole planet was just like this bulb of light where everybody there was just light. So it made me think of the souls, you know, the souls when we go back to the ether and we are light. But it
yeah,
wasn't the soul, it was definitely a planet. And then she told me about this other planet that she said there's another planet just like yours that is almost a replica of Earth, but they're a little bit more advanced than your planet right now, which means that there's humans there,
huh,
but their conscious level is higher. So they're like in another, I guess you could say, era of energy, because we all know that our planet does move
right,
through the galaxy and space. And according to where, it's kind of like a road, right? Like you're taking a car and you're going through really nice weather, and all of a sudden you hit the
yeah,
hurricane, and it's like, oh crap, you know, you got to go slower,
right,
and it's gonna get tougher. So I feel like that's what happens to every planet, and that's probably what's happening to our planet. You know, we're going through through these paths through our galaxy where we're being hit by all these negative vibes that are around, meteorites and other
Right.
planets maybe that are not favorable, that are very negative, and they're radiating to us until we maybe hit this moment of expansion where people will become a little bit even more awake than we are today. So I know that was a
Right.
lot in just 2 minutes, but I
No,
think
no,
that was
it's
probably my
fine.
first communication with something outside of here. But
Right.
meditation is beautiful. You know how you should test meditation, by the way? Find
Hmm.
someone that does telepathy, that does this communication. In fact, we can try it
Right.
one time if you want, when you're ready, and see what they're gonna be talking to you, and then the next day just
Okay.
corroborate in whatever it is that they told you. That is what I did when I
Okay.
first started to communicate with my meditators telepathically, is that a word?
Right.
And
It
I
is
would say, okay, wait,
telepathically
I'm
is.
crazy. What? There's a voice in my head. I'm gonna go put myself in an intern somewhere. And then I would get an
Right.
email a couple hours after, and they would tell me this is what we said, and I was like, oh, that's exactly what I heard. And maybe at the beginning there was like some things that were like, okay, I misinterpreted that, because when you do start opening this part of your mind, it's normal to doubt. I think that's the number one thing. People would think, I'm crazy. Who is talking to me? One thing that it's
Right.
going to happen to everybody. It's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to anybody that ever tries to and have some kind of communication with someone. The first thing is that's not happening. That's just my subconscious. That's my imagination.
Right.
Until it happens
Right.
very often, and you continue to do it, and that's when you actually begin to expand that confidence. I think it all comes down to confidence and to really truly believing, and believing it's outrageous. I mean, really truly knowing that this is happening and taking it as a
Right.
fact, not as an idea, you know? And once that
Right.
begins, your channel just gets so firm and so steady that whoever is around and whatever is around that feels you and feels your energy and wants to communicate will communicate. Because I think that's another thing that happens to a lot of people, is that they're so eager to find out what's on the other side, but it's not
Right.
really up to you. You know, like you can meditate as
Right.
many
It's
times as you want, but if whatever is
yeah.
on the other side, either it be maybe a soul or an alien or a person from another planet, if they don't feel like your energy is vibrating correctly, they're just not going to come through.
Right.
They're not even going to bother to communicate with you, because what's the point? You're not going to understand. And that's when
Right.
sometimes there's negative entities that actually do pass themselves through, you know how the story of like the person that's dressed like a wolf, right? Or no, what is it?
Yeah. Wolf in
Oh,
sheep
it's a
clothing.
Spanish thing.
Wolf in sheep's clothing.
But like they're
Oh,
pretending to
that.
be what they're not.
Yeah.
So
I
there's people that are communicating with aliens, that are
right.
communicating with negative beings and sharing
Yeah.
messages that are actually not beneficial whatsoever, but they put it
Right.
in such a pretty way that it's really easy to convince anybody that's weak, basically. I've talked enough.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, I mean, one of the things that they talk about is that you actually really have to get into like a very specific mindset. In other words, you have to have that higher vibrational, higher frequency. Otherwise, if you're a lower vibrational person, so if somebody, like for instance, consumes a consistent amount of like, alcohol, or is always into drugs or anything of that nature, then obviously that's going to lower the frequency of the person. But if they're like somebody that's consistently watching their health and nutrition and diet, and it tries to be a very helpful and happy-go-lucky person, they're at a higher vibrational frequency, so they're more likely to be able to communicate and connect with a higher vibrational extraterrestrial. And I think that's what was going on with Dr. Stephen Greer, where he was actually able to do that. He wasn't trying to do that at the time. He was
Yeah.
just saying that this actually occurred, and he said, but he talked about it, he said, I've been up there dozens and dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times to meditate, and this is the first time that this had ever happened, and I was just like totally mesmerized, going, holy crap. And I think that's really interesting if you really want to get down to it, where this basically deals with, okay, what would our purpose be? Why would we want to connect to extraterrestrial? And are we going up there or on that mountain to meditate, or are we meditating for that specific purpose as a general rule? Or are we meditating to better ourselves and to make our mind more still, more consistent, and get rid of all the chatter we have in our head? and everybody has it. We all have programming that we're trying to get rid of and things of that nature. So we all have to go through that, and that's where meditation is derived from. And by the way, here's a funny story, okay? I started learning how to meditate in college, and I got diagnosed with having a heart condition. And so I went to the Buddhist meditations in college, and it was every Wednesday night. And the professor basically told me, he said, or told us, he said, you have to have a pillow to kind of elevate your body in the, Buddhist meditations. And I said, okay, fine. And so I ended up buying a pillow. I was so happy I paid 12 bucks for it from Pier 1 Imports. And it had a really interesting design. And I didn't know what it was for like 5 or 6 sessions. And then my professor finally says, let me see your pillow again. And he turned a certain way. It was actually the Buddhist face. And he said, let me get this straight. You got a pillow with the Buddhist face on it and set your rear end on the middle of Buddhist meditations. He said, what kind of karma are you trying to incur here? So it's a funny story. And he was literally just, laughing his butt off about it,
Do you
saying,
still have
I
it?
swear, man, only you. No, I don't actually. I got rid of it actually. But this is years ago. It was so funny though.
That's a good trick. I'm going to share something with you guys, which I don't know if I mentioned before, but it's really strange, and I don't remember because I have like so many experiences that sometimes it's easy for me to forget. But you talked about alcohol, okay, and how I think
Right.
alcohol is
Yes.
very toxic to the body. There's nothing beneficial that you can get from it.
Yes.
But there was a
Right.
time that I was going through my like the years of purging and cleansing that you have to go through to be
Right.
able to get your channel to be 100% positive. And there was a time when I remember my meditators recommending wine, lemon, and sugar. I know
I've
how
heard
that
of that.
sounds. That's weird, but I'm gonna. You
It
know what? I'm
does.
gonna look for that email. I probably have
Yeah.
365 emails for many, many years from them that I've started to print out because eventually I want to make it a book. It's a lot of information and things
Cool.
that at the moment I was learning, and today I'm like, oh, I could have understood this so fast if it was today, right? But
Right.
when you're
Right.
going
Right.
through that path of opening your mind towards this
Right.
world, basically, it's difficult when you don't have your own personal experience. Now, when you live it and you have your own personal experience, it's really easy to just talk about it, not let anybody change your mind about it. But
Right.
they would mention that wine, one lemon or half a lemon, and a teaspoon of sugar would actually increment the energy in the body. So I know, I see what you're all doing. You're writing this down so you could go to the supermarket, get a bottle of wine, some sugar and some lemons, and you're all going to try it and see how it goes. But it worked
Did they
for me at the
specifically say
time
you?
being, and it was the only thing that they would
Yeah.
say or recommend for me to drink. Yeah, so just throwing it out there. Maybe somebody should do some studies with that and see what happens to the body when they
Yeah.
drink that, because I thought it was really curious.
It was red wine, wasn't it?
It was
It was red wine, wasn't
sorry,
it?
it was red wine. I think there's
Oh.
probably something I don't know about it has to be like good wine, I'm guessing. At
Yeah,
the end
I
of the
was
day, it's
thinking
just
more.
grape, right? So
Yeah, I was thinking it was something to deal with the fermentation process between like
could
grape,
be.
red wine and white wine. And that would be my theory behind it, anyways.
It could be, but it would be interesting to figure it out. I would like to know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's
Okay, we had
interesting.
some questions last time that Brandon,
Right.
I wanted you to answer. Did you by
Sure.
any chance check out Lovecraft?
I did. He's got some interesting ideas. He was really kind of like on the cutting edge of his storytelling and writing. So it was actually, believe it or not, according to one journalist put up there with like J.R.R. Tolkien, who obviously wrote Lord of the Rings, and he was also put up there with H.G. Wells. Now, the reason that he was put up there with these particular authors was somebody had basically said that he was kind of like on the cutting edge, like they were, about like, the idea of what can be considered fantasy or what can be considered fiction, and kind of bridging those two gaps and everything. So it's kind of like how we look at spirituality and science as well, and bridging those two gaps. Now, he had some very, very interesting works and everything, and I have sadly never actually gotten to read any of his works, but it sounded very similar to a lot of what H.G. Wells had come up with. And whenever you read H.G. Wells, or for that matter, even Tolkien, you're noticing not just only are the stories about what they're about. Like, so for instance, Tolkien was, doing Lord of the Rings and everything else. If you want to get down to it, it's like okay, here are your characters, but what is the story really truly about? And it's about the idea of being able to kind of like his stories were kind of like the idea of encompassing spirituality with kind of like lost arts and archaeology and science. So it's kind of like an interesting, like strange juxtaposition of balance and everything else within his writings.
Interesting. I've never heard of him, but Brandon does all the investigating here, as you can see. So we leave him with the hard job. You know what? Now
It's all
that I
good.
thought about it, let's go back to talk a little bit about vices, since we were talking about meditation. I'm going to give you my
Right.
point of view. Brandon, I would like you to give me your point of view. So I like to see as
Sure.
vices like drugs or alcohol, right?
Right.
Into substances, basically, that go into your body that, you know how they say that you're no longer in control, right? So there's like the other side
Right.
that kind of gets awakened.
Yeah.
You literally are no longer in control when you drink alcohol. I mean, people do it to release their stress. People do it to,
Right.
there's a word for it, but let go and just break the ice kind of thing. And it's like you go to a party and it's like if you don't have a drink, like you don't know how to have fun. That's how most people are.
Right. Yeah.
And that breaking the ice, it's actually you becoming vulnerable. So that openness that these vices or that these substances do for you could be used for something beneficial. But the thing is that because they are negative substances, like they're chemicals, let's say, because unless you're having a really, really like good Chardonnay or a good wine, I mean, if you're drinking like something that's super processed, and we know the type of wines that they have today, or even the alcohol today is not really processed correctly. It's different if you have a really
No.
great aged rum, right, or whiskey, and properly
Yes.
done, and those are the expensive ones that usually people don't have.
Right.
But you go to a
Right.
bar, you go to a club, and most people it's like you're consuming pure chemical. You're consuming something that is
Yeah.
eating you out from the inside. So
Yeah.
you get loose, you get wild, and I think this is all for a reason. I think that this is opening you up. This is opening you up to negativity because that's
Right.
why when you go to nightclubs, you see the vibes are usually. It's more than likely to have negativity in a nightclub than positivity. It's really that simple because people are there to do things that are not necessarily positive. So this is where
Right.
alcohol and drugs go hand in hand. Now, both alcohol and
Right.
drugs, there's a word for it, and I'm sure you're going to tell me when you start talking because my Spanish is taken over tonight. Um, where these substances do make you less mental, I guess we could say, in the sense that you're not thinking so
Right.
much and you just kind of let go. And that is your right side of the brain, actually, just the creative side being a little bit more awakened. So there's a lot of people that will drink to be
Right.
inspired, even, or to be creative, just like
Right.
hallucinogenic drugs sometimes as well. I mean, all of these things that do alter the consciousness, that's the word I was looking for, maybe, do actually open you up to some sort of energy. Unfortunately, most of the time it's going to connect you to negative energy because you're not drinking
Right.
to have a pleasant meditation. No, you're
No, you're not.
drinking maybe to just get wild. So in a sense, you are attracting negativity with these substances. What do you think?
Right.
Maybe they're out there on
Well, one
purpose.
of the they actually are. One of the things that I could honestly say whenever it comes to alcohol, or I should say drinking excessively, and we're not talking like having a glass of wine with a really good dinner. We're talking about like totally getting wasted and everything else. One of the things we could actually say is it actually lowers one's inhibitions. So in other words, you might be
Thank
a
you.
lot more a lot more likely to make terrible decisions and irrational decisions based upon your lower inhibitions and being able to actually like calculate what the potentialities are of a certain decision, a certain choice, or even a certain look or phrase based upon these lower inhibitions. So people end up making some of the world's worst decisions sometimes based upon that. Now that being said, we always have heard for a really long time that some people do absolutely get inspired by taking things like ayahuasca or even marijuana and everything. I mean, just think about like half the music that came out like within the 60s and the 70s. A lot of these people were like very, very high but made some of the coolest music ever. So it's kind of a strange balance of how are you being inspired. Whenever you do go to like bars or nightclubs, I will definitely say there's always has been for the longest time that I can remember, always has been very negative vibe about it. And I think that's one of the reasons that I've never really, kind of gelled with the whole nightclub or bar scene. I mean, it just isn't me personally speaking. And I'm not like trying to downgrade anybody that does it, but I always kind of say if somebody really, enjoys getting drunk and completely trashed all the time, they're doing it to mask something else that they haven't really truly addressed. And obviously the alcohol or the drugs really kind of masks that. But my personal opinion is it amplifies. It makes it 1,000 times worse. So if they have like anxiety, depression, those drugs, that alcohol is going to make it 1,000 times worse. Alcohol is a depressant, as is many of the drugs, the street drugs out there. They're also forms of depressants. So in other words, they actually make you worse, even though people think it makes them better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I've been there. I was one of those teenagers, never touched drugs, but definitely alcohol was like,
Right,
and I would just drown
right.
my sorrows with alcohol. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And every time I
Yeah,
would just sink more and more. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. And I think that if anybody else has gone through
right,
this, which I think a lot of people have gone through, and it's not a solution. It's just adding more problems. But when you think about it in
right.
energy, you're just making yourself more and more vulnerable to attract more negative
Exactly.
entities to you.
Right,
It's not
right.
good.
Yeah.
All right, Brandon. So,
I
any
yeah.
recommendations that you would like to give people if they want to start in meditation and communicating, or just for themselves?
Okay, well, the one thing I could say, for years I was already doing yoga, tai chi, and everything else. And meditation was kind of like one of those things where it got me because I used to be kind of the type where, and you can kind of probably already tell this probably from my first podcast episode or not first episode that I did on here. I used to be the type where I would be bouncing off the ceiling, and I'm talking like really high strung, really hyper. And it got me to a point where I was actually able to like be calm, relaxed, and focus, which is a really big deal. The one thing I could say is get into a very quiet place. Make sure there's like no television, no video games, stereo blasting, or whatever you can think of, and just sit there and just sit there calmly and notice your breathing. And literally, like if you have a thought that's distracting, like say I got to go work on my car, or I gotta go, do some homework or whatever it is. Notice that thought, but don't get up. So it's a kind of a discipline thing where you have to kind of discipline yourself from getting up and doing what you normally want to do, and you're kind of going against the grain. So in other words, it's kind of like how we talk about the idea of creating a new person or creating new memories based on different behavior patterns of what you previously have done. So that's where meditation actually derives from in a lot of ways, is to be able to have that moment of silence, that moment of peace where you just say, okay, these are my thoughts. I need to deal with them and process them. And at the same time, I'm also focusing on my breath work and being able to do that. And when you start focusing on your breath work, they have obviously, we talked about this with like the chakras and with the Kundalini awakening that Dr. Not Dr. Greer had, but uh, the doctor that was aboard the shuttles and the astronaut and everything else that I did the most recent episode on. But what's interesting,
Um, we've been doing this for a while, so it's not something like we were talking about in the beginning. Don't yourself, and I know that sounds silly, but it's basically if you don't know yourself and if you don't notice that your body and soul is telling you, it's kind of like when you're doing that is
right?
causing me harm, stop, and it's going to reflect in, whatever, a rap. Any comments or questions for next week that you want us to talk about and bring into, and go ahead and
Is
share your podcast one more time.
it's called Revealing the Truth with Brandon Wells. I'm on Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify.
Amazing. See you next week.
See you next week.
All right, guys. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, everyone. See you later. Continue
See you,
now for
Jenny.
our members only in Miami TV. Kisses.